Hello everyone, my name is Sofia, welcome to my channel. Today we have a step-by-step tutorial on knitting a beanie hat. In this video I will show you how to calculate the number of stitches so that the hat fits your head perfectly. We will talk about what a fixed brim is, how to knit it correctly and who it is suitable for. I will also show an easy way to bind off the stitches so that the crown of the hat turns out neat and beautiful. You can wear this hat with a pom-pom or without one, and in this video you will see how to make a pom-pom and how to attach it securely. I truly believe that a hat is an excellent first project for beginner knitters. Many people start with a scarf, but it takes a long time to knit, and often your motivation fades before you finish. A hat, on the other hand, knits up much faster, and the result will definitely make you happy. Before we move to the yarn and the tools, I want to show you two hats made using the same method. Both are my size, but they are slightly different. The green one turned out thinner and the blue one is more voluminous. Before you start knitting, decide what effect you want, a lightweight, thin hat or a warm, thicker one. The thicker the yarn, the larger the stitches will be and the puffier the hat will look. For the blue hat I used Bella Baby Bliss yarn. The composition is 100% Australian merino. The yarn is made of 8 plies. When choosing yarn, it is important to consider not only the thickness, but also the fiber content. Natural wool can be prickly, and then the hat will be uncomfortable to wear. That's why I recommend merino wool for knitting hats. It is soft and doesn't itch. And if you are sensitive to wool, like I am, take a look at yarns made for children. They are especially soft, although their color palettes are usually more delicate. I also should mention that yarn made from plant fibers, such as cotton, linen or bamboo, does not hold ribbing well, which is why, in my opinion, it is not suitable for hats. So, the conclusion is this. For a hat, it is best to choose pure merino wool, or a wool blend yarn, or a synthetic yarn that keeps its shape well. My skein contains 50 grams and 86 meters. The color is called baby blue and the recommended needle size is 4 millimeters. A logical question arises: how many skeins of yarn do you need for one hat? To be honest, there is no precise answer. For the green hat, including the swatch and the pom-pom, I used less than 2 skeins. For the blue one, I used exactly 2 skeins, and the third skein would have been needed for a pom-pom. So it is quite difficult to predict the exact amount of yarn in advance. If you are knitting a hat for an adult, plan for at least 2 skeins of 50 grams each, or 1 skein of 100 grams. For a child's hat, 1 50-gram skein may be enough. Buy yarn with a small extra margin if you like to play it safe, like I do, or buy only the minimum amount needed if you prefer to take risks or can easily purchase more yarn later. The next question is, which needles should you use, double-pointed needles or circular needles? The head circumference of an adult is usually between 50 and 60 centimeters. Circular needles typically come in lengths of 40 or 60 centimeters. For example, here are my 40 centimeters circular needles. This measurement is taken from the tip of one needle to the tip of the other. The cable in such needles is short, which means that it is constantly stretched while knitting. Personally, I found this uncomfortable, although many knitters prefer this option. Circular needles that are 60 centimeters long are more comfortable to hold and work with. But hat fabric often stretches on them and the stitches may become larger than on the swatch. Starting to knit on double-pointed needles may feel unusual and even a bit difficult, but with time you get used to it, and personally I knit all my circular items on double-pointed needles. For this hat I am using double-pointed needles in recommended size, 4 millimeters. If you still decide to knit your hat on circular needles, you will still need a set of double-pointed needles of the same size, because only with them can you neatly close the stitches at the crown. Next, for the measurements, I will need a ruler and a flexible measuring tape. I will also need a pen and a sheet of paper to calculate the number of stitches and to keep track of the rows I need. To weave in the yarn ends, I use a special long needle with a large eye. It is made of plastic and is designed specifically for knitting. It is not a sewing needle. And of course, you will need a sharp scissors. Kitchen scissors or children's craft scissors will not work. Please choose good scissors and store them separately. This way they will stay sharp for a long time. If you plan to decorate your head with a pom-pom, you will need these pom-pom makers. You can make a pom-pom without them. Of course, on my channel, along with this video, I posted another video where I explain all the different methods. I will leave the link in the top right corner and at the end of this video. But technology keeps moving forward, and these pom-pom makers really make the process faster and easier. To attach the pom-pom to the head, I use a ribbon that is 3 mm wide. Thanks to this ribbon, the pom-pom can be easily removed when the head needs to be washed. And to attach the ribbon neatly, I will also need a 2.5 mm crochet hook. To calculate the required number of stitches for the head, we first need to knit a swatch. I will be knitting the head in a 2x2 rib, so I cast on 22 stitches. If you have knitted with me before, you know that for a swatch I usually cast on 20 stitches, but for a 2x2 rib the number of stitches must be divisible by 4, that would be 20, plus 2 edge stitches. This gives us a total of 22 stitches. I cast on the stitches using the classic method. I have a separate detailed video showing how to do this. The link will appear on the top right corner of the screen. You can, however, use any cast-on method you are comfortable with. If you are knitting on circular needles, keep in mind that the swatch should still be knitted flat, back and forth. Let's start the first row. As always, when knitting flat, I simply slip the first stitch onto the right needle without knitting it. Since this is the first row after casting on, all stitches are knitted through the front loop. I knit 2 knit stitches through the front loop, then 2 purl stitches also through the front loop. I repeat this sequence, 2 knit stitches and 2 purl stitches all the way to the end of the row. The last stitch, just like in all following rows, I knit a purl stitch through the front loop and then turn my work. Now we move on to the second row of the 2x2 rib. I slip the first stitch again. Then I knit 2 knit stitches, but this time through the back loop. After that, I knit 2 purl stitches in the usual way through the front loop. I continue like this to the end of the row. And as a reminder, the last stitch is always knitted as a purl stitch. The third row and all following rows are knitted in exactly the same way as the second row. I'm sure you won't have any trouble continuing on your own. So, how many rows should you knit? For the head to fit perfectly, we will be measuring the swatch not only in width, but also in height. That's why I recommend not saving yarn here and knitting between 16 and 20 rows. If your yarn simply is limited, knit at least 10 to 12 rows. And finally, here is an easy way to count your rows. If you look at the knitted fabric, knit stitches look like small letter V. For example, if you have knitted 2 rows, you will see a column of 2 V-shapes. Simply count the number of V-shapes in one column, that will be the number of rows you have knitted. It's simple and very clear. I have knitted 20 rows and now I'm going to bind off the stitches. If you have a limited amount of yarn, you can skip binding off and washing the swatch. Simply slide the swatch off the needles, do not wash it and take the measurements the way I will show you a bit later. After that, you can unravel the swatch and use the same yarn to start knitting the head. But I will do everything properly and bind off the stitches. I slip the first stitch onto the right needle without knitting it. I knit the next stitch as a knit stitch and then pass the first stitch over the second one. This leaves 1 stitch on the right needle again. I repeat the same steps with the second knit stitch. Next come the purl stitches. If I were binding off on the finished item, I would knit them as purl stitches, but for a swatch this doesn't matter, so I knit all the stitches as knit stitches. Here is the last stitch of the row. I knit it as a knit stitch as well and pass the first stitch over the second one in the same way. I return the remaining stitch to the left needle, knit it again as a knit stitch, then cut the working yarn and pull it through the stitch. I tighten the knot and the swatch is finished. Now the swatch needs to be washed. For wool, it's best to use a special liquid detergent. After washing, lay the swatch flat on a smooth horizontal surface and let it dry completely. While the swatch is drying, I'll show you how to take head measurements correctly. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a volunteer model for this video, and showing everything on myself while filming is quite inconvenient. But I was allowed to use this doll instead. First, we measure the head circumference. The measuring tape should be placed along the line where you plan the edge of the head to be. In this case, the doll's head circumference is 32 centimeters. Since I am planning to make a fixed brim, it is important for me to calculate how many rows need to be knitted so that the head fits well. To do this, we measure the distance from the forehead to the base of the skull. This measurement is called the head depth. Just like before, we measure it straight from the line where the edge of the head will be. In our case, this measurement comes out to 19 centimeters. We also won't be choosing the brim height randomly. For worms, the brim should fully cover the ear. That's why I measure the ear along its entire length. You can take several measurements and use the largest one. For the doll, the ear height is 3 centimeters. What should you do if it's not possible to measure the head? For example, if you are knitting a head for a baby who hasn't been born yet, knitting a gift or making heads for sale. In this case, you can try to find head circumference charts online based on age and gender. Sometimes these charts also include recommended head heights. If you can't find the height of the future head online, the most practical and reliable option is to go to a store that sells heads. There you can find a head in the right size and measure its height as well as the height of the brim. It is important to remember that the width of head is not equal to half of the head circumference. Now let's go back to my swatch. I have already washed and dried it. I gently stretch it in different directions and place it on the table. Now it's ready for measurements. First, I measure the width. I place the ruler in the center of the swatch, and the width comes out to 6.5 centimeters. Next, I measure the height. First, I count the rows the way I showed earlier, by counting the column of V shapes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. I get a total of 21 rows, because the bind off row adds one extra row to the 20 knitted rows. I place the ruler along the bottom edge of the swatch and measure only the knitted rows, not counting the horizontal chain at the top, which belongs to the bind off. The height of my swatch is 7.5 centimeters. Now it's time to move on to the calculations. First, I will calculate how many stitches I need to cast on. For the swatch, I cast on 22 stitches, and the width turned out to be 6.5 centimeters. My head circumference is 56.5 centimeters. I will denote the required number of stitches as x. To calculate x, I multiply 56.5 by 22 and then divide by 6.5. The result is approximately 191 stitches. However, if I cast on 191 stitches, the head will turn out too loose, because the swatch was measured in a relaxed, unstretched state. When worn, the head should stretch and fit the head more snugly. That's why I reduce the number of stitches by 35%. I do this by multiplying 191 by 0.65, which gives me 124 stitches. This will result in a comfortable fit, not too tight and not too loose. If you have very voluminous hair, you can reduce the number not by 35%, but by 30% by multiplying by 0.7. If on the other hand you want a tighter fitting head, you can reduce the number by 40% by multiplying your stitch count by 0.6. Next, we need to check whether the resulting number is divisible by 4, because the repeat of a 2x2 rib consists of 4 stitches. I was lucky, 124 is divisible by 4. If you get a number that is not divisible by 4, for example 135, you need to round it down to the nearest number that is divisible by 4. For 135, that would be 132. Next, I will be knitting the head in the round. To join the knitting in the round, I need one additional stitch. This stitch will disappear immediately after joining, but it still needs to be cast on at the beginning. As a result, I cast on a total of 125 stitches. Now we need to calculate how many rows to knit before starting the decreases. My head depth, the distance from the forehead to the base of the skull, is 37 centimeters. Since the head is knitted in the round, the front and back are knitted at the same time. That means I divide 37 by 2 and get 18.5 centimeters. I will denote the required number of rows as x. In my swatch, a height of 7.5 centimeters corresponds to 21 rows. To find x, I multiply 18.5 by 21 and then divide by 7.5. This gives approximately 52 rows. From this number, I subtract 8 rows that will be used for closing the crown. Yes, in reality, the bind-off will take slightly more rows, but for the calculations, we subtract exactly 8. As a result, I get 44 rows to knit before starting the decreases. Now, let's calculate the height of the brim. The height of my ear is 6 centimeters. I usually add 0.5 centimeters so that the brim covers the ear with a slight overlap. This gives a brim height of a 6.5 centimeters. This is the minimum brim height. You can make it higher if you like, but it should not be shorter. I will again denote the required number of brim rows as x. The swatch measurements are the same. 21 rows equal 7.5 centimeters. To find x, I multiply 6.5 by 21 and then divide by 7.5. This means I need to knit 18 rows for the brim. Now we can move on to casting on the stitches. Do not economize on yarn. Leave a long tail so that you are sure it will be enough. It is very frustrating when you are missing just a couple of centimeters and have to unravel everything and start over. If you are knitting on circular needles, simply cast on the required number of stitches onto one needle. Do not pull the stitches too tight. This is important. If you are knitting along with me on double-pointed needles, you cannot cast on all the stitches onto one needle and then distribute them among 4 needles. You need to cast on directly onto 4 needles. Divide the total number of stitches by 4. In my case, I get 31 stitches on each needle, and I cast on 1 additional stitch onto the last needle. When you have cast on the stitches onto the first needle, take the second needle and continue casting on. It may seem like the needles could slip out, and sometimes there is a temptation to tighten the stitches more, but you should not do this. In reality, the chance that a needle will slip out is very small. I have cast on all the required stitches, including the additional stitch on the first needle. I checked that the stitches on the needles are not twisted anywhere. Now I am going to join the knitting in the round. There are many ways to do this. I will show the one I personally use. For now, I do not take the 5th needle. In my left hand I hold the fourth needle and in my right hand the first needle. I slip the additional stitch onto the right needle, then pull the first stitch from the right needle through it and move that stitch onto the left needle. The additional stitch drops off in the process. Now I pull on the short yarn tail, it tightens the join. The stitch that I moved to the left needle, I return back to the right needle for an even stitch count. Since I'm knitting on double pointed needles, I will use the yarn tail as a reference point to know where the new round begins. If you are knitting on circular needles, it is convenient to place a stitch marker at the beginning of the round and simply move it with each round. I have joined the knitting and I am starting the first round of the brim. I take the fifth needle. In the first round I knit all stitches through the front loop. I start with purl stitches. That is how I prefer it, but you can start with knit stitches as well. Then I continue following the pattern, 2 purl stitches, 2 knit stitches. I finish the round with 2 knit stitches. If you are a beginner and you cast on rather tightly, the first round may be difficult. It is normal, it will get easier later. The first round is complete. Since we are knitting in the round, in the second and all following rounds, the stitches are worked differently than in the swatch. Purl stitches are worked through the back loop and knit stitches are worked through the front loop. I continue knitting the 2x2 rib for all 18 rows of the brim. When I finish, I will show you what to do next. The brim is finished. Now you need to decide whether you want to make it fixed or leave it loose. A fixed brim looks like this. It is secured and its height can no longer be changed. This option is suitable for those who like a very neat, even brim all the way around the head. If you want to change the height of the brim, depending on the weather, your hairstyle or simply your mood, then there is no need to fix it. What other purpose does a fixed brim serve? Take a look. A column of knit stitches on the wrong side looks like a column of purl stitches. If you simply continue knitting the head in the round, the pattern on the brim and on the main body of the head will shift in a checkerboard pattern. This is not a mistake. It can also look beautiful, but if you want the stitches on the brim and on the head body to line up, you need to make a fixed brim. Fortunately, it is very easy to do. To form it, I swap the stitches. Where I previously worked purl stitches, I now work knit stitches through the back loop. Where there were knit stitches, I now work purl stitches through the front loop. I knit this way until the end of the round. The round is complete. This round is the first round of the head. If you look closely, you can already see the first V shapes. This is the point from which I will count the head rounds if I need to check how many rounds have I been worked. I begin knitting the second round. I follow the pattern: knit stitches over knit stitches, purl stitches over purl stitches. In total, I need to knit 44 rounds and this will be the second one. I have finished knitting 44 rounds and now it is time to start shaping the crown. The first round of decreases begins with 2 knit stitches. I knit them as usual. Next come 2 purl stitches. To work them together neatly, I first slip both stitches onto the right needle, then return them on the left needle while turning them, and then purl the 2 stitches together through the front loops as 1 purl stitch. Then I continue following the pattern: 2 knit stitches, then 2 purl stitches without a decrease, then knit stitches again, and here comes the next pair of purl stitches. In this pair I also make a decrease after turning the stitches first. In the first decrease round, the decreases are worked in the purl stitches every other time. I continue this way until the end of the round. Everyone has a different stitch count, so it may happen that the round starts with a decrease and also ends with a decrease. This is normal. The first decrease round is finished. I knit the second round following the pattern without any decreases. Knit stitches as knits and purl stitches as purls. If up to this point you were knitting on circular needles, now is the time to switch to double pointed needles. Divide the stitches onto 4 approximately equal parts. Take the first double pointed needle and knit the first section of stitches onto it. Then the second section onto the second needle and so on. You will use 4 double pointed needles, and after that the circular needles should be completely free. I have reached the third decrease round. I think you can already imagine how the knitting will continue. I will make the decreases in those purl stitches where I did not decrease in the first round. Let me remind you, where I have 2 purl stitches, I slip them onto the right needle, return them onto the left needle while turning them, and purl the 2 stitches together through the front loops. And I will knit the 4th round without any decreases, following the pattern 2 knit stitches and 1 purl stitch. I will return at the 5th round to show the decreases in the knit stitches. I start at the 5th round. Here the decreases will be in the knit stitches, and I begin immediately with the first 2. I knit them together through the front loops as 1 knit stitch. Then I continue following the pattern 1 purl stitch, then 2 knit stitches without a decrease, then a purl stitch and again a decrease in the knit stitches. I think at this point the principle is clear. In the 5th round I make decreases in the knit stitches every other time until the end of the round. The 6th round is worked without decreases, following the pattern. In the 7th round, the decreases are in the knit stitches, but this time in the places where there were no decreases in the 5th round. The 8th round is again without decreases. It will already form a 1 by 1 rib. After that, I will show how to close the remaining stitches. The 8th round is finished, and I move on to the 9th. Here I will work together every pair of stitches, knit and purl. To do this, I need a small trick. First, I knit the first knit stitch as a regular knit stitch and leave it on the 4th needle. Now my round begins with a purl stitch. Next, I knit the knit and purl stitches together as 1 knit stitch through the front loops. I work the next pair in exactly the same way. No longer skip any pairs and continue like this until the end of the round. The 9th round is finished. There will be no more rounds without decreases. In the 10th round, I again knit every pair of stitches together as 1 knit stitch through the front loops. In this round, I will already be collecting all the resulting stitches onto 2 needles instead of 4. From this point on, I especially recommend tightening the stitches well and making them firmer. Now I have 1 stitch left onto the left needle. I slip it onto the next needle and set the freed needle aside. It is no longer needed. I continue knitting the stitches from the left needle onto the same right needle. Again, 1 stitch remains. I slip it onto the next needle. Then I knit the stitches from the next 2 needles onto the needle that has just been freed. When I knit the last stitch from the left needle, this will be the second freed needle. I set it aside as well. If at the end you have 3 stitches left, as I do, there are 2 options. Knit 2 stitches together and knit the last one as a regular knit stitch, or knit all 3 together as a knit stitch. Knitting 3 stitches together at the end of the round is quite uncomfortable, so I choose the first option. Now, if at this stage you have 8 stitches or fewer left, no more decreases are needed. You can immediately move on to closing the stitches with a needle. If, like me, you have more than 8 stitches left, knit 1 more decrease round, knitting 2 stitches together just as we did in the 2 previous rounds. I have knitted 1 more decrease round and I stop the decreases here. If you still have more than 8 stitches left at this point, no additional decreases are needed. We will close the crown with a needle. My second skein is almost finished, but the free end of the yarn is still too long, so I trim it and thread it into a needle. Now it is important to determine correctly which stitch to start closing from. I look at the needles. If I were to continue knitting, I would start from this stitch. That is exactly the stitch from which I begin removing the stitches from the needle. I insert the needle into the first stitch in the same way I would insert a knitting needle, from the left to right. I pull the needle and the entire yarn tail through the stitch and slip it off the needle. Now the stitch is held only by the yarn. In the same way, I remove all the remaining stitches, collecting them onto the yarn. When all the stitches are removed, I pass the needle through the hole that has formed. From the inside of the head, I catch the needle, turn the head inside out, and tighten the crown by pulling the yarn. Can you see? In the rounds where I said to tighten the stitches well, this was especially important, because otherwise there would be large stitches and noticeable holes here. Now the yarn needs to be secured. I usually make the first knot directly around the tightened crown. I insert the needle from one side, bring it out on the other side and tighten the knot. Then I make another knot in the opposite direction. This one I make double. I tighten the yarn well but carefully, so as not to break it. Now I will show how to weave in the yarn ends. I do not weave in this end or cut it right away if I plan to wear the hat with a pom-pom. A little later in the video I will show how to make a pom-pom and how to attach it using this end. But since this hat will not have a pom-pom, I will show right away how to hide the yarn. Here is the wrong side of the hat. Where we needed knit stitches, on the wrong side they look like waves. I choose which of these waves to pass the needle through in order to reach the column of knit stitches. Now I hide the end inside this column. I insert the needle into each stitch through the center, and it comes out in the left side. Then I go into the next stitch above, and in this way I move up about 10 stitches. After that, I turn around and go back down approximately to the middle of the pass I have just worked. Only now I insert the needle through the other side of the stitch through the right loop. When I finish, I do not cut the remaining yarn right away. I will cut it after I wash and dry the head. At that point, the yarn fibers will fluff up slightly and catch onto each other, and the end can be trimmed perfectly so that it does not stick out. On the wrong side of the head I have a small knot. It was created when I joined the second skein of yarn after the first one ran out. I will hide these two yarn tails in the same way as the end at the crown, only guiding them in different directions. I think this part is quite obvious, so I will not go into detail here. But I will show in more detail how to neatly hide the very first yarn end left at the beginning of the knitting. In front of me is the head viewed from the right side, and the brim is already folded. I will hide the yarn end on the wrong side of the brim, so I simply unfold it back and see the side I knit inside. The yarn is already threaded into the needle. I work in the same way as before. I choose the nearest column of knit stitches and begin hiding the end inside the column. At the beginning, I pull the yarn firmly so that no loose sections remain. I move up about 12 stitches, then turn around and go back down approximately to the middle. Now all the yarn ends are hidden. I will wash the head by hand using a gentle wool detergent. Gently squeeze out the excess water and lay it flat to dry on a smooth horizontal surface. If you needed a fixed brim along with me, it is better to fold it before drying. This will help it to hold its shape. If you did not make a fixed brim, the head should be dried fully unfolded. Now I will show you how to make a pom-pom. I am using a ready-made pom-pom template purchased from a store. For the pom-pom I use the same yarn as for the head, but if you wish you can choose a different color. Each template consists of two halves. They need to be aligned so that the bumps on one half match the holes on the other. They do not snap together. This is just a visual guide. Next, I start winding the yarn. The first few rubs are always a bit awkward. You need to hold the template and secure the yarn end at the same time. You can start winding from either side, it makes no difference. I find it more convenient to start from the right side. Make sure the yarn is wound evenly and tightly enough. This determines how full and fluffy the pom-pom will be. When one half is fully wound, I move on to the second half. I usually pass the yarn over the top and continue winding in the same way. After the winding is complete, I close the template into a circle and secure it with the clamps. Then I cut the working yarn and begin cutting the wrapped yarn along the outer edge of the template. The yarn stays in place thanks to the tight winding, so nothing will fall apart. It is best to use good sharp scissors for cutting. It remains to secure the pom-pom. If you are using wool yarn, I recommend folding it in half. A single strand can break when tightening the knot. I am using a narrow ribbon instead. Mine is white and contrasts with the yarn color, but it will not be visible in the finished piece. I pass the ribbon between the two halves of the template and tighten a strong knot. Then I tie another knot on the opposite side. Finally, I make a double knot, turning the pom-pom over once again. Now I remove the template. The strands are firmly secured and the pom-pom is almost ready. Its shape is round, but some ends may be sticking out. I carefully trim them with scissors. If needed, you can slightly even out the shape so that the pom-pom becomes perfectly round. You can make the pom-pom even fluffier by steaming it. I showed how to do this in a separate video about pom-poms. Take a look if you're interested. And now I will attach my pom-pom to the head. Stepping back slightly from the center of the crown, I bring the crochet hook from the inside to the outside and pull out one end of the ribbon. Then I pull out the second end in the same way on the opposite side. I turn the head inside out. To one end of the ribbon, I attach the yarn tail that I intentionally did not hide at the crown of this head. I tie a knot, tighten it well, and then make a bow. I trim the excess ends of the ribbon and yarn, not too short so that the pom-pom can be easily removed or attached back to the head next time. My blue head is washed and dried, and it is time to cut the yarn ends. Both of my heads are finished, one with a pom-pom and one without. I have trimmed all the remaining yarn ends. Both heads have a neat, well-shaped crown, and both fit my head perfectly. I really hope you were also able to knit this head and that this video was helpful for you. If so, please give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!